Welcome to a Parthian Films blabbercast. Parthian Films, in cooperation with the Snake River Theatrical Plagiarists Guild, is pleased to present the story of the 1927 Plum It Series. This tale is a part of the yet-to-be-released third installment of your Snake River Skirr travel guidebook. A giant was born in the town of Minsk. Ephraim Schmelz was born into a Jewish home that had a long history of working in the entertainment business. This particular branch of the family worked in the circus. The Schmelz performers traveled all over Russia and Eastern Europe to rave reviews. Ephraim's father was well respected in the circus world. Mr. Igor Schmelz had performed as a juggler, a high wire artist, a clown, and for a brief period he had swallowed swords. The man could do a little bit of everything, but his true love was his horses. He had great affection for each one of his ponies. Igor trained them with the most gentle hand. When a foal was born, he would wait to determine its personality before he would train it for a specific act. Oftentimes he would create a new act based on the trick the horse seemed suited toward. He treated his children the same way. Igor would introduce his kids to a wide variety of the circus arts, then wait and see where their love and talent directed them. He would show his kids all the tricks he knew, whether they be equestrian, clowning, or the acrobatic arts. In a sense, Igor's children knew all his secrets. The Schmelzes would perform individual acts under a wide variety of stage names. However, when they would all get together for the finale, they billed themselves as the Minsk family. The poster advertising the show translated roughly as the Minsk family of equestrian experts and musical acrobats. This grand finale was a marvel of sight and sound. All the Schmelzes and their horses would perform an act based on a ballet or a famous opera. Every creature took part in the big show, be they on 2 legs or 4. All could sing or dance. Now, the horse's ability to sing could be debated, but all those who saw the act would remark on their musicality, their neighs and their whinnies. There were in fact several horses that could fart in time with the music. Most often these flatulators would be given the tuba part. For the sake of the posters and the variety, the family had gone by many a name: Schmelz, Minsk, Loshad, Pavlovs, Petrovs, and Sokolovs. Whatever it took to sell tickets. And certain names would suit certain cities. It could get quite confusing. But the elder Schmelz had it all worked out. His family would often ask, "Who am I today?" As Ephraim the giant grew, it became difficult to find an appropriate role for the lad. No name change could hide his size. For a time he occupied a comedic portion of the show. The horses were trained to show great fear if the giant ever attempted to mount them. Against Ephraim's and his father's wishes, Ephraim eventually left the main act and was shuffled off to the sideshow with the freaks. He played the role he was built for: a giant. Ephraim Schmelz was huge, but he was also proportionate. There were no deformities that one could see beyond his larger size. Yet with makeup and costumes, his act sold better when Ephraim played an ugly giant. The Barkers promoted the idea that the giant would steal and eat your children. Schmeltzes had no real choice. The story sold tickets. Ephraim began to hate the crowds before him. They would jeer and taunt him. They threw rotten food and dirt in his face. He would roar and pull at his chains. And all but the youngest in the crowd knew this was an act. Outside of circus life, Ephraim would try and interact with kids his own age. Inevitably, they would play as children do, and Ephraim's size meant he could toss other children around like rag dolls. And as kids will do, he did. The other circus mothers banned him from playtime. He was a lonely child. Outside of his family, the horses became his only true friends. At just 4 years old, he stood 5'8". He was the height of a grown man. People looked at him and saw a man without facial hair, but a man nonetheless. Then he would act like a 5-year-old, and strangers would call him a klutz, a block of wood. At the age of 18, he had matured more or less normally and settled into a height of 8'4" tall. Because of his lonely upbringing, he developed a reserved nature. It would be an understatement to say that life on the road was an adventure. The senior Schmeltz Igor had to balance work and a family. The head of the family was a high-wire act in more ways than one. The giant son did not deserve the harsh treatment he received from the crowd, and his beautiful daughters were jeered in another way. Ephraim the giant was not happy, and he was not alone in his state. A number of his brothers and sisters were also delusioned with circus life. They grew tired of being constantly on the move and feeling so alone. Igor tried to console his troubled children with the idea that the family was all they needed. The crowd is populated with hostile fools. Only your family loves you. Feel lucky that you have such a strong family to support you. Those idiots in the crowd probably have a hateful mother. If Igor was the head of the family, then his wife, Azuli, was the heart. She was not only a valued performer, she was the company's accountant, seamstress, cook, and blacksmith. Azuli slept an average of 4 hours a day. She would never complain, but she was getting worn down. One night, Igor woke himself up with his own snoring. He opened his eyes and saw Azuli in candlelight, mending a costume. He noted how beautiful she was. Under the flickering light, he gazed upon her face and reminded himself how deep his love ran. She was a study of concentration. He thanked God for his luck. Then Azuli shook out her right hand. That same light that shone upon her face now illuminated her hands. It seemed, in that moment, Igor finally noted his wife was an old woman. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis. He looked again upon her face, and this time recognized his interpretation of a concentrated look was actually the face of pain. This picture of his love, as told in this new light, broke Igor's heart. The next day, Igor gathered the family to make a major announcement. He said that he and Azuli were moving back to Minsk. He sold the idea as a new business opportunity. My children, we are poor, but our wealth is in our strength and our family bonds. Distance can never break those bonds, and in that way, we are rich. We are poor. Igor rubbed his fingers together, indicating money. But I tell you, children, there are rich people throughout Russia. These dukes and duchesses want only the finest of everything, including the finest horses. They are told if they want the best, they should go see me, Igor Schmeltz. We have a willing buyer. We have a well-deserved reputation. The only problem, children, we do not have a store. We do not have a location. Once we have some solid ground to sell our wares, we will have a thriving business. And dare I say, Igor looked right at Ephraim, we may just build a home. The family cheered and threw their hats into the air. Igor Schmeltz went to each family member, and he had a unique message for each one. Some were told that he knew they had been born to be in the circus. He knew how much they loved to perform, and that they should stay with the circus. He gave them his blessing. Another circus manager, Irvine Borstein, was more than willing to take on any of the Schmeltzes who wanted to continue to perform. Irving was a good man, and Igor was comfortable with the new arrangement. When Igor met with his giant son, there were only a few words. The two hugged, and Igor asked his giant son, "Can you help me build a home?" With that, the family split up. Some stayed on with the circus, and some packed up and moved back to Minsk. Despite the fact that Igor had other motivations, there was truth in his tale. It did not take long before the word spread. Horse buyers flocked to the farm outside of Minsk to purchase the finest herd in all of Russia. Once the business was established, Igor had another trick to pull off. He needed to decrease Azali's workload. She had the help of Ephraim and those brothers and sisters that returned to Minsk, but Azali's work habit would be hard to break. As luck would have it, just as they moved back to Minsk, a new blacksmith, Ivan Ichibam, moved to town and set up shop. Igor and Ephraim went to visit the new business. Mr. Ichibam's shop was clean and professional looking. Igor brought one horse to be shod as a way to test Ichibam's skills. From the moment he started on the pony, both Igor and Ephraim recognized the man's talents. He was a gentle soul that treated the pony with great respect. As Ivan and Igor talked, Ephraim began to wander around the blacksmith's barn. He was standing near a door that all of a sudden opened towards him. The action of that door and the sight it revealed almost knocked Ephraim over. There was standing Ichibam's daughter, Sarah. She was beautiful, and she stood 6 feet 7 inches tall. Ephraim fell in love. The feeling was mutual, and the two were married in the spring. Sarah was a godsend. Not only did she inspire Ephraim's heart, she cured her mother-in-law's back as well. Sarah was a hard worker, and soon mother and daughter-in-law were fast friends. The farm prospered. The giant was truly happy. Sarah had Ephraim's first son and named it after Sarah's father, Ivan Ichibam Schmeltz. He was a big boy, but not freakishly big. Not only was the giant finding his stride, the entire family flourished. Once a year, the family held a reunion. All the performing Schmeltzes would come home and gather at the Minsk farm to eat, laugh, and catch up on the latest news. One year, there was over 60 Schmeltzes eating sandwiches and borscht. As Ephraim and Sarah's children grew, this reunion would grow as well. Not only in size, the importance of the day on the calendar easily displaced any religious holiday. The Minsk children looked forward to seeing their traveling family. The kids would gather around and listen to stories from uncles, aunts, and cousins. The traveling Schmeltzes were professional storytellers, and they would perform for the youngest living on the farm. For the circus members of the family, this was the most important show of the year. They told tales of far-flung lands and their great adventures. The Minsk farm children were spellbound. Hearing of enchanted lands and magical lives lived by their traveling family was so foreign to their quiet existence on the farm outside of Minsk. When the gathering was over, some of the farm children fell in spirit. They asked their father, as kids will do, a tough question. Why? Why did they live such a quiet life in such a remote part of the world? Why did they leave the circus? Ephraim would give what would become a well-worn, patented answer. He'd pick them up and place them on his gigantic lap. We stay here because I am Jewish and I have a giant nose. This routine answer was followed up by a great snuggle with his truly giant nose. The great giggle festival would follow. His children loved to ask this question, knowing that hugs and laughter would be the result. When the children became older, their isolation became a more pressing issue. Ephraim's family began to desire adventures of their own. They dreamed of leaving the farm. For these lonely children, beyond the family gathering, contact with the outside world arrived in the form of business. Strangers would come to the farm to buy horses. They had no interest in visiting the kids. However, this business would have a profound effect on their young lives. A visiting buyer would load up a horse or two to take away, and the kids would lose a friend. The youngest Schmelz children would take elaborate steps to keep their favorite horse at home. They would cover the nag with mud, stain their teeth, or teach the pony to walk with a limp. The deception did not fool an older Schmelz. When Ephraim had to deal with the broken-hearted child, he would tell the young soul that the horse was in fact lucky. The departed friend would get to travel the world, to see new lands and seek new adventures. The horse's departure should be thought of as a happy day. This talk of travel and adventure just caused deeper feelings of isolation and regret about their monotonous existence. Why? Why did they live in such a place? It was almost as if the question and the answer was a rite of passage for the family. As the children grew, Ephraim began to recognize the pain associated with his patented answer. The idea that we stay here because I am Jewish and I have a gigantic nose eventually wore thin. Over time, the meaning behind his simple answer expanded. A child would press to be told more of the story. As a rule, when a child hit their teenage years, he or she would be given a longer answer. We had to move because we are Jewish and I have a gigantic nose. When we were in the circus, we were loved by thousands. We brought joy to our audience, but make no mistake, we were alone. We were loved, but not welcome. They would never invite us to their home or ask us to dinner, or inquire about our well-being. These fans would turn up their nose if they ever saw us in the street. They'd laugh at us and our antics and marvel at our tricks. But when we got hurt, no one would rush to help. We could die right there before their eyes, falling from a high wire or other mishap, and those fine Russians would sit on their hands. We could die right before their eyes, and they would go home, never even offer us a prayer or a kind consideration. To them, these fine Russians, we are no better than performing animals. We had to move here because we are Jewish. Despite the challenges their situation presented, Ephraim's children were generally happy. Their adventures took place in the fields and the forest surrounding the farm. The giant and Sarah were very happy. The horses were happy. The couple had 11 children that survived, and at a high point 27 horses. Ephraim felt blessed. Azalee fell into the role of grandmother with great gusto and skill. She, too, was a performer, and all her grandkids loved her dearly. In her latter years, she never did anything more physically taxing than lifting her grandchild off the floor. Ephraim's father, Igor, was still in good health. His wisdom was his strength in maintaining his leadership. Not that it was ever an issue, but Avram, day by day, was taking over the business. Although he would not admit it, day by day, more and more, Igor relished the role of grandfather. Avram's eldest son, Ivan Ichibaum, settled in at 6'4", strong and handsome. The 16-year-old son shared his grandfather's and his father's love for the horses, but longed for a bigger life. One spring day, 2 members of a great family and their servants came to the Schmelz farm. The children were aware that these were special guests, and they were required to be on their best behavior. The Botkins were distant relations to the Romanovs, the royal family of Russia. Alexei Botkin and his daughter, Sadie Botkin, came to buy Sadie a horse on the occasion of her 15th birthday. The girl was accustomed to being spoiled and could not decide on just one horse, so her father bought her 6. Alexei Botkins had not planned to manage 6 horses on the trip back to Moscow, so he asked Ephraim to provide a handler. Ivan was smitten with the royal Sadie, and Ephraim knew it. The father could not deny his eldest son his right to love and be loved. With his son's heart in mind, he arranged that Ivan be the one to get the horses to Moscow. In the negotiations, Ephraim made a special arrangement with the Bodkins. His son would be hired on as a trainer and would stay on in Moscow with the horses. The Bodkins agreed, and with little time to prepare, Ivan packed up with the 6 horses and was sent off to pursue a new life in Moscow. It was a sad departure. The family was splitting up again. As promised, Ivan was a faithful letter writer. Ephraim and his family received the correspondence almost daily. 6 months after leaving the farm, he sent 2 letters on the same day. One letter was for the entire family. The other was only for the eyes of his mother and father. Both letters were true, but told different stories. The letter that was opened for the entire family was his usual fare. Ivan blustered about this new city. He painted Moscow in a most magical light. The great palaces and majestic homes were a sight beyond his wildest dreams. He would have been negligent had he not kept his brothers and sisters up to date on the horses. He let everyone know both he and the horses were getting plenty to eat and were well cared for. Ivan also waxed on about his new friend and mentor, Bobrov Rokovsky. It was with great pride that he explained a new equestrian trick. Their horses, as trained by Bobrov, had become experts at playing polo, and that he, Ivan Ichibaum Schmelz, son of Ephraim, grandson of Igor, was now a champion polo rider. The other letter, sent to Ephraim and Sarah, told another truth. Ivan admitted to his parents that he changed his family name. He explained to his parents how his love for Sadie Botkin had grown tenfold on his journey to Moscow. On this same journey he learned a more difficult truth. No Jew would ever be allowed to marry Sadie. For the sake of his new love, he made up a lie. He told his new employers that he had been adopted by the Schmaltzes. He told them that the only thing he knew about his real family was that they came from good Russian stock. This sorrowful fable only endeared Ivan to Sadie's family, specifically Sadie's mother. She pitied the boy and took great pride that he was now with his own people. Sadie's mother believed she saw signs that Ivan was indeed from good stock and in fact was born of noble blood. Ivan felt that Sadie's mother needed to believe this story. She knew that her daughter was falling in love, and if Ivan was a commoner and a Jew, the marriage would not happen. When Ivan allowed this woman to talk this way, he could not help but think of his horses and how their heritage was traced. So-and-so sired by so-and-so. In the eye of Sadie's mother, he was just plain stock. He would not have been surprised if she had asked to examine his teeth. The son shared these emotions with his father and mother. Ephraim understood his son's dilemma. He told him as much in his return letter. In a way, he blamed himself for Ivan's sense of abandonment. He had his own name changed throughout his life. Within a few weeks, news arrived that Ivan would marry Sadie. Ephraim and his real family were not invited. Bobroff Rofosky would be the best man. Time passed and children grew. The farm outside of Minsk prospered. In Moscow, Ivan became well versed in the sport of polo, and life was good. It could have remained so had the darker elements of humanity not played a hand. One night, everything changed. With great excitement, Ivan and his new family and his good friend Bobroff Rofosky arrived at Ephraim's doorstep. Children were calmed down and the adults in the family had a meeting that ran all night. The next morning the entire family gathered to hear the news. They must leave the farm. They were all in grave danger. Ivan, supported by his mentor Bobroff, tried to explain the situation. It all came down to his relationship with the Romanovs and their Jewish heritage. Ivan was the same loving soul he was when he left the farm. This Bobroff fellow seemed to be more practical in his assessment of the trouble. After the initial shock, the family prepared for the journey. Most of the younger Schmelzes were excited about the move. Finally, they would get off the farm. After all those years in the circus, preparing to travel was a common activity. Most of the tasks were straightforward. Cherished possessions must be stripped down to only the most practical items. Books and knickknacks could be replaced. Each child was assigned chores. While they were getting ready to go, Igor demanded that the family take on a new role. He insisted that for this performance, they all must be perfect. They were now the Smiths from Belgium. Each child must now start calling their family members by new names. Hiram was now Robert. Schmendel was now Ted. The family drilled the new story day after day, night after night. The new fiction must become habit. It was impressed on each member that this was no game. Bobroff Rofosky changed his name to Bobby Jones. As well as new names, Igor acquired new passports and documentation supporting the lie. After 6 weeks of training, packing, selling, and giving away items, the Smiths left the Minsk farm never to return. In all, 47 Smiths and 1 Jones traveled to Ireland. Traveling their way through Russia, they picked up another 81 extended family members. Not all the Minsk clan heeded Igor's warning and changed their name. Some felt that not only would the fiction not be required, it was a disrespectful act. In Ireland, they hired a steamer, and all told, 67 Smiths, 61 Schmelzes, 1 Jones, 57 horses, and 2 goats sailed for Canada.